now, for the last 6 months or so at least, I've been focusing mainly on state channels. Obviously, one big challenge of blockchains is that they're slow. I mean, performance on chain is, even though the Eternity blockchain is pretty fast compared to other blockchains, blockchains in general are kind of like ultra slow append-only file systems compared to most technology that people are used to. So we can handle up to 100 transactions per second. That's not impressive by any other metric than blockchain technology, essentially. So then we're looking for ways to scale, and state channels are essentially a way to go off-chain, but still in a way that is connected to the chain. So you can take some of your funds on the chain, you can put them in a channel, which is essentially a session between you and some other party, and there you operate still in a trustless mode where all the transactions have to be co-signed so that you both agree on how to transition. But you're not actually going to the chain unless you want to put more funds in, or you want to take funds out, or you want to close the channel, essentially. So it's in a sense a way to amortize cost, so that it will cost a bit to open the channel. You will have to pay fees to close it, obviously, but in the meantime you essentially do work for free. So then you can transact very quickly. You can, in one of our channels, you can, if you call contracts, you're probably looking at like 20 to 30 contract calls per second in one channel alone. If you're transferring tokens, you can probably transfer up to like 100 tokens, or do up to 100 token transfers per second. If you're just sending plain messages that don't have to be signed, you're looking up to 1,000 per second. So you can do much more high frequency interactions in a state channel, but still the connection to the blockchain. And then of course our channels are only one-to-one, but now we're also working on a concept we call virtual channels, where if you say have a channel set up with, that could be a service that allows you to find other parties that you might want to set up a channel to. You could actually stage a virtual channel from an existing channel and then set that up very quickly. You don't have to wait for block confirmations because it's co-signed and it's immediate. And then you can transfer funds and then you can close. So you should be able to set up a channel, interact, close it within, I don't know, we haven't actually gotten there yet, but I would imagine some fraction of a second. So essentially fast enough to pay for your coffee. Or say you're browsing on the web, you wanna pay for content, you could actually pay for seeing another page it would be that lightweight. You could basically just throw up a payment channel via some intermediary and do real micro transactions very quickly and safely. Most of the other state channel projects have the restriction that they have to work on Ethereum or Bitcoin, or both. And the problem is neither Ethereum nor Bitcoin really have any built-in concept of state channels. The Eternity blockchain actually does. So in the Eternity blockchain, we've built in from the ground up that the chain knows about state channel objects. So it keeps track of the state channel state, and we have specific transaction types for setting up state channels and handling the disputes. So we think that, for one thing, that's more transparent. You can go to the documentation, you can see what the basic support for state channels is, because the chain understands them. Actually, that also makes a lot of things easier on going forward. For example, if you want to implement a state channel in Ethereum, you have to do it with smart contracts. Well, running smart contracts is not for free. So for one thing, the limitations of actually having to pay, or the limitations of the smart contracts in Ethereum, not just that they are somewhat costly, affects your design choices trying to build the state channel infrastructure. And it turns out to lead to non-trivial problems. So we think that at least some things are, for one thing, we think we can demonstrate pretty impressive performance because our channels are native, so to speak. So it's fewer levels of abstraction. The different teams working on state channels are actively trying to come up with common abstractions and interfaces and ways to, I think ultimately also ways to interact. Right now, I think the answer is no for just about all different state channels, that they can't talk to each other. There is a way to payments via intermediaries that could be implemented also in Eternity using what's called hash locks. Essentially, so you kind of pack your payment, and then the recipient has some secret that allows him to unlock the payment, and then the intermediaries basically get paid once they forward the funds. And that can be implemented just about in any type of blockchain architecture, but there are disadvantages. First, you get multiple hops, and then the intermediaries need to be able to have the capacity to hold all the funds that are in flight, essentially. So right now we're focusing on another thing. I mean, we essentially, the scenario what it would look like, say that you have Alice and Bob who want to share or interact, and Alice has a state channel to the intermediary Ingrid, and Bob also has a state channel to Ingrid. Now, Ingrid could have logic sort of outside the state channels where she is transferring content, or always be done, but it's not. Then you're essentially leaving the no trust world. You have to trust Ingrid. So what we're doing now with the virtual channels is that essentially, yes, Ingrid needs to forward information between the two separate channels, but she can't really cheat, because all the updates to essentially open a new channel that looks exactly like an old channel or the existing channels, except instead of closing to the chain, they close to two separate state channels. And then they can go from there. That also makes them free and fast and very dynamic. But some dispute scenarios are going to be more involved. But we still think it's going to be quite clean, as clean as that kind of thing gets, possibly. I mean, it's pretty hairy to think through the different scenarios, but that's often the case with blockchain technology. In terms of what I'm working on, I think the virtual state channels are going to be quite a leap forward, and we're now at the point where we put all the things in place that we need to make those work. So I think that's exciting. And as far as Eternity goes, I think there is a lot of unlocked potential in that we've been pushing forward and gotten most of the things, core support in place in the blockchain. But we have yet to see the applications appearing that make use of this. It's going to be exciting. And I think in general, a lot of people are complaining about how, we're foreseeing the death of blockchain technology and everything, because a lot of people have rushed to blockchains and tried to find uses for them, but it turns out to be difficult. And I think that's partly because blockchain technology is really a disruptive technology and it requires a shift in mindset. So if you, in your old traditional mindset, and you think that, well, everyone is talking about blockchains, I want to use it too. And then you think of it just as another database or something, you're going to be gravely disappointed, because that is not what it is. It actually turns things upside down. But then you have to turn your thinking upside down too, and that's going to take time. And in many cases, I think what we're going to see is not the old successful players transforming their business to fit blockchains. We're going to have to see new players that are essentially free to think in an entirely different way from the beginning and show new ways of doing things. But then that also has to coincide with people discovering that they actually need to do things slightly differently, and that's a complex process, and it's not always pretty, and it's hard to foresee when things are going to sort of lock in and really start picking up momentum. But then on the other hand, it can suddenly explode if someone hits something that really fits well with people's needs and what's possible. So yeah, it's exciting. It's as an engineer, it's exciting to challenge yourself with some entirely new perspective. Because a lot of the things that we're working with, scaling issues, I've been working with scaling and integrity, consistency pretty much for my entire career. But they've all been solutions where there is implicit trust between the actors, and then you can do things efficiently. But if you take away the trust component, then basically all those well-known algorithms, pretty much all of them almost, become unusable, and you have to think in entirely new ways. And that's what's so interesting from a design point of view with blockchains, is that you really have to rethink everything. And that's fun.